Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you all. Thank you all for joining us today for this dialogue on being Black in corporate America. I'm your moderator and executive producer of Raven Maven, Latoya Burris. Together with our panelists, we will navigate what that means and share our own personal experiences. Therefore, allow me to introduce you to our panel of experts. As a media correspondent and content creator, Jameer has the know-how for finding captivating story angles and providing any audience with different complexities and perspectives of what Blackness looks like. Lande is a writer and director with over 12 years experience in nonfiction development, casting, and production. She hopes to contribute to increased control, ownership, and management of media for content creators of African descent across all available content platforms. Kievon Turnbull, Associate Creative Director at Katz Media, real estate investor and youth mentor and basketball coach. And last but not least, Curize Richards, leading a revolution in media by forming a content alliance offering advertising brands access to engage multicultural audiences via niche digital content and experiences created by people of color. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Happy Thursday. Had to check.
It feels like a Friday though.
I don't know what day it is anymore.
It's like day four.
Right.
All blending. So again, thank you guys for joining me for this, conversation and for participating on this project with Raven Maven and ENRICH'D Media. This is the brainchild idea of both of us. And I'm just gonna get started with some questions. So Kievon, I'll start with you. In your opinion, how important is it to have mentors in corporate and who look like you, and how important is it overall for representation?
I think really it's paramount. I think for a community such as Black community that's been kind of marginalized systemically, specifically within corporate, it's our responsibility as kind of those who've, I'll say, infiltrated to kind of pass on that knowledge to the younger Black people. So it's a responsibility, it's a duty. I try to take it on in my personal life and really do that in every aspect. So whether that's in the corporate world, whether it's in privately with friends, I think just showing that as a Black person it's possible and this is the way. I think it's paramount. I think it's a responsibility each of us have.
Lande, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think having a mentor that looks like you can amplify your exposure to the business because they're going to probably understand better what you need in the industry, especially as a Black person, a person of color in general. So it could greatly benefit you. And then also there are just certain topics that you can talk about with the mentor who can help you strategically navigate a lot of the politics in the office. So yes, get a mentor that is Black.
Definitely.
Jameer, so having worked in a majority white companies and majority Black office environments, what makes them different to you?
So several things, right? Because the obvious is feeling a sense of being yourself. I think when you go into any kind of space, like a white space, maybe like, let's just say a concert or like a sports game or a restaurant, is a sense of being out of place. And it's nothing that the white people are doing. It's just, you feel comfortable amongst your own, usually. Now, again, everything is situational. For me, working at a Black company, I was able to be my authentic self, kind of let my hair down and be able to ask advice and have certain conversations, like Lande was saying, that you just can't have with white counterparts, because they don't understand sometimes the experience that a Black creator or a Black employee is going through, as opposed of somebody who's white. Like I will say this, having to view, like, for instance, let's take like Trayvon Martin, having to absorb that, see George Zimmerman get off and have to go to work the next few days. I was working at a Black company, and so that sense of overwhelming camaraderie was there. It was unspoken, didn't even need to be mentioned. Everybody came in and they were visibly upset. Fast forward to working for a white company, there could be somebody like Eric Gardner who dies, and you got to go into work the next day with all that trauma packed up on you, and unless it's big in news, nobody's even thinking about that. It's a regular Monday or a Tuesday or whatever day it is. And so to have that kind of to be not seen on that level, and to be expected to go above and beyond, is something that we've been doing since corporate America has existed, since slavery. You see just internalized pain and trauma, having to work through that. So it's definitely a trickle down effect to corporate America. So.
Chris, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think Jameer made a great point in terms of the experiences that we go through, the things that we see on the news. Like, I remember vividly when Sean Bell was shot however many times, at his bachelor party, walking out of having a bachelor party. And at that time, I worked at a Black-owned company. And it was one of those things when the trial took place, everyone was visibly upset. Like, everyone in the office was in uproar. And, there was a sense of camaraderie there and empathy amongst each other as people of color, where you may not necessarily, I don't even want to say you may not, you tend not to get that in majority white companies. And I think a part of that is just, one, not understanding. And I think this fear of having that conversation, or just those topics, or the issue of race being so taboo in those spaces, that people are even afraid to address it, or afraid that they might say the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Super taboo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like that racism is just in corporate in general is such a taboo thing. Like, people rather talk about politics or religion, or personal stuff that's going on in their marriage than touch on race at all.
Yeah. Like tiptoeing around it, and
definitely.
Like, we don't have. It's almost like a not even almost. It's a slap in the face to kind of be presented, to tiptoe around something, to almost make it seem like we are not capable emotionally or professionally to understand how certain things work. It's a slap in the face. I've had to tell several white colleagues.
It's because people have this stereotype, or feel like we're going to go crazy because something was said, as opposed to, you work with me every day. You know how we engage and how we interact. Why would you think now, because something that touches on race comes up, I'm now going to behave differently?
Well, I know, especially when like the Mike Brown case came out, and there was a lot of protests and the verdict. I think it was the day of the verdict, and me and another Black woman in the office, I couldn't work for the rest of the day. And, my bosses and colleagues were like, hey, do you want to go for drinks? And it was just like this complete dismissal. Right. I heard some mentionings of it, but I was like, this is just another headline to you. Like, it's not something that you experience personally. And that's when I knew, like, yeah, my days in corporate America are numbered, because I can't.
Yeah.
I cannot.
Yeah.
I think it's really unfortunate that the responsibility is on us as Black people within corporate to kind of prove this stigma wrong.
Right.
So, the responsibility shouldn't be on us. And I find myself in certain times, I want to overcompensate. So you know what? I want to be even more calm in this situation to prove that I'm not the angry Black man. Whereas a natural reaction should be what is expected. But, every day when we go into the office, we're constantly proving that, you know what, this stigma isn't true and I'm going to prove it today, which it should be on us to have to do.
Great point. Do we feel like when things like that happen, actually having the company or the leaders at the company in which we work for actually say something and speak out about it would be helpful, would make us feel like we're seen or we're heard?
I definitely believe so. I think it starts from the top, to show that you're progressive and show that, everybody's opinion and feelings matter and count. That's something that has to be echoed from the top down. It's not on the people at the middle level and lower levels kind of voice their opinions and hope that they're heard. I think it's from the top down. If that's the culture of your company, then the CEO needs to step out and say something.
Right.
I agree, but disagree, because I feel like a lot of companies make these statements and they're just empty. It's empty rhetoric. Like your atmosphere at the company does not reflect anything that you're saying.
Yeah.
So if it's coupled with a real concerted effort to transform the culture at work when it comes to race relations, I'm with it. Otherwise, I'm like, just let me have the day off. Like, that's how I feel. Can I just have the day off, or can I leave? If I feel like I'm in emotional distress over these kinds of events happening in the news.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of the statements are hollow, and that's some action behind it. And you see that everywhere now. NFL, we can go into a whole different conversation, but there's a lot of companies right now during this social climate that they're hollow statements.
And I want to talk about the social climate as well, because with everything, the reason why we're doing this panel discussion is because of like the current climate and all the, it seems that a lot of corporations are trying to position themselves as if they have a new position and that they will not tolerate racism. But for people, like if you were working at Starbucks and, they at that one point had a position where they weren't really aligning with the Black Lives Matter movement, what advice would you give to people who are within a corporation like that?
I think it depends on your level of investment and your end goal. Like if you want to move up the chain of command, then yes, you should create you should say something. You should talk to someone in a position of influence at the company that can, create some sort of, initiative to address these issues. But if you are seeing this as a means to an end, I say get your money and start your own business that reflects the workplace culture that you want to represent, because you got to pay your bills, and the bigger picture is worth just taking an L and moving on. That's my personal opinion.
I think about what Jameer said to me not that long, a couple of weeks ago. He said, Black people didn't just come about. We've always we've always existed. So now to be in a space where people have to come out and say, we support the Black community after all of this, it's kind of like, what were the actions that could have been taken prior to this moment to support, right? It's, for me, sometimes I feel like it's a little too late.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if you, because it's not like like you said, Jameer, it's not like we just came about this earth. We've always been in these spaces, and we've always been experiencing these things that are happening right now. It's just that now the spotlight is on people to be more accountable. So they feel like they have to step into that and hold themselves accountable, or at least say that they are an ally, when it takes so much more than just a statement on social media saying that you stand with the Black community.
In the same newsletter, letter.
I think that is happening because of the current administration that we have, coupled with the quarantine. People have time, and they're also feeling they are personally feeling the effects of these institutions that have discriminated against us. So I think that because people feel a personal incentive to speak out against injustice and disparities, you're seeing more of an effort. On top of the fact that, like, you know, I also think that there's less of a filter with our generation and some of the younger generations of Black professionals that I definitely don't see with, like, say, like baby boomers or like some Gen Xers that I know. Like, they are definitely more conservative and more about assimilation. So I think that has a lot to do with how people.
Part of that comes from the fact that a lot of those people came up under
exactly, and civil rights,
right,
era, all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. At that point, you almost feel like, I don't want to say anything to jeopardize this freedom I just got.
Right.
Yeah.
We are in a totally different space than that, right? Like, we know we're here, we've been here, and we, you know, we're not fighting for these rights anymore. Like, they are ours.
Yeah. And also, I think from my experience, what I also have been seeing is an overwhelming sense of white guilt, where white people are now like, oh my God, I am so sorry at this. I can't even believe at what's happening to our country right now. And I'm like, okay, we could save that, because this is always, like Curize was saying, this has always been happening. George Floyd and Breonna Taylor weren't the first Black people to be murdered ever in history. And so there's a long lineage of having to sit with pain and perform exceedingly well with just the expectation of we need to play on an equal playing field as our white counterparts without the resources or the pay, let's be honest. So the fact that there is a global pandemic that is not just affecting the Black community, but is also affecting so many white people across the country, to not be able to go outside, to not be able to go to the Hamptons or wherever your favorite vacation spot, but to have to sit down and watch this in front of the TV. White people are like, we can't escape this. Okay, we need to go apologize. And what I told my white counterparts at my job was, I said, don't let this be a revolution and we're starting something that lasts as long as the current news cycle when it comes to Black issues. So we know that for a good 6 weeks, Black people are going to be plastered all over the place because of the uprisings. There's a Black man that was murdered. And so there's this whole like thing. And so we know how ratings work. We know what is going to hit and what is going to sell. And after the 6 week mark, excuse me, coronavirus will come back in. Like, I told them this to remind them that we can't lose steam. But because how things work, out of sight, out of mind, and white people go back to the regularly scheduled programming. And that is spaces that don't include Black people in them. So we can we can talk about everything that we want to set up. We can make public apologies. We can promise that we're going to amplify Black voices. But what does that really mean without the force and Black people at the table to ensure that this happens? Because you can't amplify Black voices through a white gaze. It doesn't work.
You know, I think another thing too is that we're a primary consumer base. Yes. So if these brands don't address issues that are relevant to us as consumers, we see them as less credible, and we don't want to spend money. And I think that's also part of why you're seeing so much conversation around race with these companies that have never said anything before. So
yeah, I think that I personally don't put too much merit into any of the statements that have been made by these corporations at this point, because this is just history repeating itself with new players. That's really what it is. So whether it's Trayvon Martin, Sean Bell, Sandra Bland, Castillo, this happens over and over. George Floyd, this isn't new. So now's the time you want to come out. So why is now the time you want to come out and make a statement? You have to question their motives at this point. So I personally believe that because, as Jameer said, white guilt is at an all-time high, we need to not put as much emphasis on, all right, I'm so glad they came out and said something. I think we as Black people need to work as one to kind of make some type of initiative come from it, right? So all right, they made a statement, that's great, but what can we now do to have some action come from it that will sustain itself after this news cycle ended?
Yeah. So I would like to pivot a little bit and talk about just a little bit more about the culture, the corporate culture, and the Black experience in the corporate culture. So I have a question from Nathan Kievon, and he asks, did you feel like you had to make Black sacrifices, for example, let something slide that you wouldn't have otherwise in order to advance? And I'm addressing this question to you, Kievon.
Unfortunately, I say yes. And again, this goes with fighting the entire stigma that we were speaking about earlier. There's a stigma around Black men and Black women within corporate. So you always want to kind of fight against it. And like I said, I don't think the responsibility should be on us to have to, prove that something isn't true. But unfortunately it is. And I personally, I've let a few things slide in. I think I've mastered the art of kind of like laughing it off.
Right.
Where sometimes I really shouldn't. And I think me personally, I have to pick my spots when I want to address something and when I don't want to address something, because I've learned that a lot of white people are ignorant to some of the things that may be considered insensitive or distasteful. So there's times when I have to kind of step up and say, you know what, I don't necessarily agree with this, and for X, Y, Z reasons, and there's times I'll laugh it off. But that's just the plight of Black people in corporate.
Chris, you have anything to add to that?
I don't know that I've made sacrifices really to grow within the space, but I'm also a different person. And I say this to everyone, I teach a workshop, and I'm an instructor at a college where I teach career development. And, one of the things for me, I feel like I don't believe in sacrificing yourself personally, whether it's your Blackness, your integrity, anything, for any job, for any corporation. That's not, I don't believe in that, period. And it's something I teach in my classes. So when I've been in situations where I find that things were said that may have been inappropriate, or things were asked of me, or comments were made around me, I always, it's incumbent on me to say something, right? Because as Kievon said, a lot of just people in general are ignorant to other cultures, right? So I always take every opportunity I can to, one, educate someone on something when they are ignorant, and two, try my best to explain why what they said was either insensitive or inappropriate, right? And so I don't know that I ever have or ever will make a sacrifice in that way.
Right.
For me, it's either you either take me or leave me, but I'm not sacrificing who I am to fit into your corporate America, whatever that culture is.
But do you guys feel like a lot of us may be doing that subconsciously, like are not fully aware that we're doing it sometimes? Like, it's like you're showing a mask or a version of yourself that you think is acceptable in that world?
Absolutely. Yes.
That happens.
I think that, corporate America the decorum of corporate America is a manifestation of white supremacy. And the average Black person in America you know, regardless of your upbringing, like does not inherently express that. Some may, you know, there are some Black people who really blend in and they're fine. Many of them have grown up around white people. But for someone like me who grew up in the inner cities of New York City around all Black people, like it was an adjustment. I could not relate. I generally do not relate socially to my coworkers of other races, you know, and I mean, that was a struggle for me. And then, you know, people tell me, oh, well, you should learn more. You should study pop culture. You should, and I'm like, they're not studying my frame of reference and the things that interest me, you know? So what I ended up doing was being a worker bee. And it just still didn't work because I socially did not blend into those environments. Like I just kept my head down and worked and tried to execute at such a high level so that whatever I didn't relate to socially would be overlooked. But because of the nature of the business that I'm in, which is production, it wasn't effective when it was time for me to get to like a senior position and you're talking about managing people and things like that. So I had to make a decision, like, Lande, are you going to play this game, you know, and fully like integrate into this environment, or are you going to do your own thing? And I chose to do my own thing.
Yeah. I think you said a key word. Do you want to play this game? So essentially, that's really what it comes down to. It's a game, and corporate in itself is a game, but be Black in corporate is an entirely different one. And I think because the culture doesn't necessarily, or the corporate environment doesn't necessarily embrace Black culture, what Black people end up having to do is suppress our personalities. You know, I don't necessarily feel like I'm changing who I am, but I'm definitely toning it down.
Yeah.
You know, I'm definitely toning it down. So it's being Black in corporate America is suppressing personality, in my opinion.
In many cases, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some Black people get lucky where they're like so good at what they do that people don't care and they just want them. But the average person is not in that position, you know, like especially if you're in a competitive field.
Right.
And I think you mentioned earlier, if you don't necessarily relate to that, if you don't know pop culture, if that's not the neighborhood you grew up in, and you know that was the environment that you were around, then it's increasingly difficult to relate. You know, so
yeah, I find that you have to. From my experience, it's exactly what Lande said, where it's like, I may not necessarily have made sacrifices to get ahead in the space, but there's definitely this underlying thing of having to suppress your personality, right? You have to dress a certain way. You can't wear certain things. And granted, that should exist, right, within reason as well. But it's like, you know, you can't wear dreads. You can't, you know, wear hoop earrings. You can't all these different things that are so like not acceptable. In that
Essentially.
space. But I do agree that like for me, I would say I've gotten to the space where I feel like I'm comfortable enough to come to work wearing, for the most part, what I want to wear, whether that's sneakers and Jordans. Like whether I come into work with a pair of Jordans, I can do that because I've gotten to this space where my work speaks for itself, right? So working at a company where they would have us wear suits if they could, right? Because it's just that type of company those are the type of the places that I've been in, getting to a level where it's like, no, people know what I bring to the table. They know that I work diligently and my work speaks for itself, that you kind of have that room to play, right? So I think you kind of get to that space where you know how far you can go.
Yeah.
Go there at all.
Yeah. And I think because like corporate America is so systematic as well, if they don't catch you on the front end, they'll catch you on the back end. So like my thing was never like, I went to HBCU, so I grew up around a very pro-Black family, so I had no problem speaking up for myself. But the issue that I have, and you know, I even told Curize, was knowing my worth. We're in a space where people like to make you work over like heavy, and you don't see a lot of gratitude, or especially like financial gratitude, or moving up in the company. And you look at you stare at your resume, and you look at all the things that you do, and you look at your title, and you look at how much you're getting paid, and you're like, some don't make sense. Like, why am I going above and beyond, doing maybe leadership role work, doing director role work? I could do your job, I could do your job, I could do your job. Why am I sitting in this position here? And so having to realize, having to be kind of secure in yourself to assimilate and come into corporate America, and to try to have some authenticity about yourself, as well as knowing that you were prepared to die on certain hills, is super, super, super important. Like, I don't care enough about corporate America to be silent. So like, this is just like my really like my first, my first like big job in corporate America. So I don't plan. I know where I'm going, and I also know that I will always have to work with white people, but I understand that I gotta push. And if not for me, for the people who are coming in back of me, or I'm trying to set up systems so when I leave, that Black people can be present. And so to be able to stand firm and to be like, no, I know my worth. Here's what I'm demanding, and here's what I want. Even if it don't go my way, somebody who never even thought about that or was silent says, man, that's possible. That's possible to do. So many of us operate under this like, well, if I do this, well, what are they going to say? Am I going to get fired? Yes. And I totally understand that. And I'm not in any position to be like, well, I'm going out all for my job right now. And, just in the pandemic and being able to lose my job, like, that's not an easy feat. But what I can say is that in moments like this, where the outside is reflecting what's in corporate America, I have to stand on a platform for not only myself, but for the Black women who work too damn hard, for the Black men who work too damn hard, and for Black people who have been culturally and systemically oppressed outside and also in corporate America.
Right.
I just can't let it slide.
And I'll say, as someone, and I, Jameer and I had this conversation too, as someone that, for me, you don't necessarily look at me and see my Blackness, right?
Right.
And to know that, knowing that someone may look at me and they know I'm not white, but they may not necessarily know that I'm Black. Corporate is still the place where I experience the most racism, where I've heard the most racist comments, where I've walked into rooms and people thought that my white male assistant was the boss and I was his assistant.
Wow.
Right? I've been in those types of spaces. I've been in spaces where I've gotten into arguments with coworkers, and when I walk away, they say that I'm being hostile, even though my back is turned toward them. Right? So it exists. It definitely exists. And I feel like I'm with you, Jimmy. I feel like I'm with you, and like, I don't care that much, right? I care because obviously, I'm working and I've grown in my career and all that, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my integrity to play this game, right? I am who I am in that space. I know what I bring to the table. I know what my value is. I know what I'm worth. And I know I'm an asset to what I bring to the table. And that's what this is. It's an exchange, right? I do a job and you pay me for that job. But I don't think that just because it's corporate or just because I want to grow, that I should be silenced when something is wrong. Wrong is wrong and right is right. And for me, there's no gray area.
So, Lande, you've addressed the disparity in corporate as it relates to treatment, right?
As a what?
As it relates to treatment and favoritism and behavior based on race and privilege unhinged. So, why did you want to share that story?
Well, I made that film when I was like, basically, I decided like, fuck this, I'm leaving. Like, I can't, like, I'm going to like burn my office to smithereens. Like, I was, and I think because of the nature of the industry I work in, production, there's no HR. There's no checks and balances in these industries. It's at will employment. They can fire you whenever they want to. You know, obviously most of the people, an overwhelming majority of people who managed me did not look like me, and they brought in people who didn't look like me, and my credibility was constantly being questioned no matter how hard I worked or how much I executed. So I think that there was like this boiling resentment of my 10 plus years in this business where I was just so fed up. And like, I've witnessed so many incidents with like people doing things that would put me in jail. Like, I have seen white colleagues do crazy shit in the office that is clearly illegal and not professional, not appropriate. So obviously there was some resentment there. I mean, I'm like, I told you the other day, Latoya, I'm no longer that person. You know, I could watch it and kind of like be objectively laugh at at the movie I made. But at the time I felt it. And I also, because I was going for a VP position at a production company and they decided to go with a white girl, they brought her in, even though everybody at the office told them to promote me. I was stewing in that for a long time. So yeah, that's what made me make the movie. And also I just think like, you know, I was talking to a close friend of mine and she was like, you gotta get free from the plantation, you gotta escape. So we would always make like slave references. She was like, that shit's like a plantation. And I was like, yes, you're right. And I really started to think about it. Like, I was like, there's the house slaves versus the field slaves. I was definitely a field slave, you know. And there was definitely colorism expressed in these environments, you know, then like the different degrees, right? Like people, non-Black POC got better treatment than Black people, you know, then the white guys who generally like the owners and like the overseers or the senior executives, and like the woman would do their bidding, kind of like manage the rest of us to make sure we're all in line. So when I started to see the parallels between like slavery and corporate America, I was like, oh my God, I should make a movie about it. So that's what, you know, that's so
heavy.
Yeah, it's really heavy.
Mm.
But people resonated with it. Like, I remember going to that and everyone who was sitting looking at Privilege Unhinged was just like,
this is my job. Yeah.
The whole time, right? Because we can relate to the racial bias and and just the preferential treatment and all that stuff that happens in corporate, in addition to race. Right, like that's just like the layer on top of everything else.
To piggyback on that,
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's okay, but I was going to say, just to piggyback on that, I had a friend who also was calling her coworker the colonizer, like in Black Panther. Every time, because her interactions with her were always like super intense. So it's just interesting to hear you guys like experiences as far as like what it's like navigating, or when you did navigate, some of us, the corporate arena. So I'm gonna now wrap up here, and we're gonna start doing some Q&A. So to the attendees, to the guests, if you have any questions that you would like to ask the panelists, please write your questions in the chat, and we will do our best to bring them forward. So I do have one already here from Patricia Barron, and she wants to know, as an established professionals, what advice would you give your younger selves?
Okay, so it would definitely be understanding your worth. I think that's so key. And the reason why, where it's like the slaves are fighting amongst each other to trying to get the last piece of scraps. And it is, I've seen it ruin so many people and ruin self-esteem. And, you know, to understand that, you know, first of all, there's so much room for everybody, and then two, everybody doesn't have to be doing, like, finding your unique space and finding your unique tune is so important as somebody who's gonna be in this space of corporate America. Having an end goal is something that's important as well. So if you know your worth and you kind of know your end goal, you won't get stuck so much in the pockets of what this looks like, because it is a plantation, and having to depend on this job to keep your lights on and keep, you know, food on your table. You know, it's always a constant sacrifice when you stand up and you stand firm. But it's so critically important to know your worth, know your assets, and write everything down. Write everything down. This experience has taught me, like, write down notable milestones, write down numbers and things that you bring to the company, because you have to also remember that you are an asset. Like Curize said, being an asset to a company, you could take your skills and go someplace else, and I guarantee you they'll pay you what you want. They'll pay you what you're, well, I don't think you get paid what you're worth, but they'll pay you way more than your situation will allow you at this point in time, because you've grown. And so to be at some place for 10 years and to go above and beyond in the things that you're doing, write those milestones down, because numbers speak volumes.
I would tell my younger self to don't be afraid to speak up. Because I feel like I did not speak up a lot of times when I should have. And I knew it was because I was probably going to get fired, because I don't know, I just feel like I scare white people. To be honest, I think there's something about me that's really, like, they're really, really intimidated by it. And I've, like, kind of compared, like, other Black people who have had an easier time. And I think there's an assuredness about me when I walk into the environment. You know, like, I'm really assertive and clear about who I am and how I want to express myself. And it feels disruptive in those environments. And
Yes.
I think that I, you know, shielded myself as a result. And I should have just, you know, kind of used that opportunity to expand. And I think that also it's important for Black professionals to realize, like, we need foot soldiers on both sides of the fence, right? Like, we need people in the corporate space who are trying to create change in institutions, but we also need people who are generating businesses. So it's okay if you don't choose the corporate route and you decide you want to do your own thing and get clients, or, you know, find another way to acquire funding and money. And that might be a harder route. But the timelines are kind of, like, congruent a lot of the time when you start talking about people getting into senior positions. And I think I kind of psyched myself out for a long time and said, you know, there's no way I can do this. I'm going to have to wait, or I might have to pivot, or blah, blah, blah. You know, I just kind of kept having these circular conversations. And it wasn't until I felt like I was being pushed out that I finally decided to take on entrepreneurship. So I would say, like, it's okay if you want to be an entrepreneur and you don't want to be in corporate America. Like, there's nothing wrong.
Definitely.
Thank you, guys. Curize, Kievon, anything you'd like to add to that question?
I would definitely tell my younger self, just to kind of echoing what Jameer said, just to know your value, know your worth. Don't second guess yourself. Something that I've dealt with, I know a lot of Black professionals deal with, is imposter syndrome. Just sometimes feeling like you're not deserving. I'm lucky to be here. I think, you know what, that was like,
ooh, yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
You know, like, never feel that way. Never second guess yourself. Like, you're not lucky to be here. You know, you earned your position, and
Right.
you're bringing a service to the table, and they're compensating you for your service.
Right.
Not for who you are, for your service, but you deserve to be there. So I'll definitely tell myself that. I think that just instills a certain level of confidence in a lot of the decisions you make. I think you feel more willing to speak out around race issues, around anything really. Just knowing that, you know, I didn't luck out. I'm qualified for this. I'm trained for this, and you guys just recognize it fast enough, and that's why I'm here. So that's I would definitely echo that to my younger self.
Thank you.
I don't know that. I don't know if there's anything different that I would do or tell myself.
I'm not surprised, Curize.
Seriously, like, and you know, like Jameer and I just had this conversation, right? And one of the things that I learned quickly in corporate was that one of the key things I always say to people, I found that with working in corporate, people who were terrified to lose their jobs always lost their jobs. Right? For me, like, I always saw that. I saw that people who were always terrified of losing their jobs, they didn't perform well. They weren't really liked because they were jerks. Like, they always lived in the space. They would hoard work. They would, you know, not want to help other people younger than them coming up, didn't want to foster them. So when I started in corporate, my mindset was like, I don't ever want to be in a space where I'm like this person and just be terrified of getting fired. Like, I wanted to be that. And I feel with that almost comes like, there's like this sense of just freedom in that, right? So I've always had that type of attitude. And even to this day, like, being fired is never something that I fear. And it definitely, I think, has given me freedom and has allowed me to be able to know my worth and demand what I see fit, and which is why I'm able to teach the course that I teach, right? Because that's the one thing that I always say to people. I'm like, you're not doing, like Kievon said, you're not doing anybody a favor. You just be happy to be there, right? Like, you were chosen for this role. You went through the whole process like everyone else who's at this company, right? You are just as deserving as the person who hired you. In some cases, you might be even more deserving.
Might be more.
Right?
Might be more.
We need to just be demanding in our worth, and know what it is that we want from those spaces, and know that as long as we're doing what we're doing, we don't have to worry about getting fired, right? And I think my main thing was, as Black people in corporate, as people in corporate in general, if you're not preparing the next person to take your role, you're not doing your job, right? And sometimes people are so fearful, even as Black people. Like, sometimes I've had managers that were so fearful that I would take their job that they didn't even want to foster my growth. Right? I had to leave because people were just, they just wanted to keep everything for themselves. And I'm like, listen, my goal is to be able to train whoever's coming up under me, because I want to grow as well, right? And if they're not growing, I'm not growing. Right? So I think just being able to strip that fear away of losing your job or getting fired, that just gives you just like real freedom to be able to move how you want to move in the space. And it really gives you the ability to understand your worth and give yourself some more, like, just see your value more.
Right. And I think you answered this question that someone else is, Thomas is asking, but I'm gonna pose it to Jameer and Lande and take your turns. But what have you done to attempt to make it easier for the generation after you?
Oh, wow.
Oh, Lande, you wanna start?
Okay. I created a nonprofit organization, grassroots collective, that is designed to provide skill enhancement opportunities for Black content creators. So for me, I see that as my effort in passing the batons, because I often was invited to networking events and would be the only person of color, the only one. And it would be like hundreds of people there. And I was like, where's the Black version of this,
Right.
So I don't know, I guess divine timing, like I met my business partner at the right time, because that's when I started to ask those questions, and then like it just took off. And I feel like, we have had people say, I have learned more through you guys than I did at film school. That's crazy.
Wow.
That's so profound, Wow.
So it really feels gratifying to have that kind of effect on people's lives. And the organization has changed my life. I also am really working on hiring Black women that I feel trying to come up in the business, even if they just help me per assignment and I pay a small fee. I just want to help people get money and get paid and get their projects out there, help me get my project out there. And, you know, I'm generally open to talking to, you know, anyone that reaches out. You know, I would prefer email. Instead of like texting and DMing me. Oh my God, it kind of drives me nuts, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I'm not, or, you know, just getting on the phone and like helping people figuring out this business, because I know how tough it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was, I mean, powerful. I think to that point, when it comes to creating content, I like to always think about my audience and who do I want to like this content to hit. And it usually 98% of the time is Black people. So I'm always mindful of the audience. And as a content creator, because I grew up and I love a lot of things, not being able to create outside of my comfort zone. So whether I'm making content about that's funny, whether I'm making content about like things that are sentimental, whether I'm making content about things that are serious, it's all for the Black community and for Black people. Like case in point, I started this series at Buzzfeed called Welcome to the Party, which takes a Black man and his daughter, and they talk about, you know, his daughter's 2 years old, and you know, it's a funny light video series, but the real message is, without having to say it and force feed it, is saying that there's this stigma that certain Black men, or a lot of Black men, aren't present in their children's lives. So instead of doing a 17-minute think piece about it, let me just show you that Black people can be funny, we can be smart, we're just non-monolithic. So I choose to show that through my art. So whether it's, again, I'm doing something on mental health, whether I'm doing something light in front of pop culture, I'm showing you through my art the complexities of what Black life looks like. And it'll take longer to get on, because like I'm not being boisterous about it anymore. I'm just feeding you the content that you didn't even know you needed. And so I get a lot of responses like that about content, like, well, what made you want to step on a limb and do this? Like, what was the mindset doing this? And it's just because I didn't see a need for it, so I created it. I wanted to create it. Like, I did a video about Black dads teaching their sons how to tie their ties. Why? Because as a man, having my mother teach me how to tie a tie, I knew that my experience wasn't singular. I knew that a lot of other Black men don't even know how to tie ties, or they were self-taught, or their mom taught them. To have that experience to be shown is saying, hey, we do have representation. We do have stories that are being told. It's just that nobody is stepping out on a limb to do it. And so I've become fearless in telling stories. So if that means we're doing a story about trans Black life, then we're doing a story about trans Black life. About women feeling unsafe in America, we're gonna do a story about that. Why? Because it's necessary. I literally went into 2020 saying, just do it, you know. Shouts out to Nike, you know, but I went into 2020 saying, I'm just going to do things that make me happy and that can feed the community. So if you think it's a big hit, oh, you know, white people are accepting it, I know who I made the video for. And I make the content for us.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I got you, sis. Yeah.
So we're getting on the end of time here, so I'm gonna just present my closing question. And I guess really what I want is to give people a takeaway from this town hall. So I guess the biggest takeaway is, in your opinions, in a few, do it quickly. What do you think? What do you think people need to do as far as their, manage expectations about entering corporate, and like, what advice would you give them for like just navigating corporate in general as a person of color, a Black person?
Know how to sell yourself and deliver on that. So, because I get a lot of times, oh, I think I let me just repeat what I feel like we talked about the other day. I'm aspiring, I'm trying to get in. Don't talk to people like that. Don't talk to people, PSA, Black people. Don't talk to people like that. I am intending to write my first screenplay by such and such day. I am planning to shoot it. This is my strategy. You have to show people your capability of execution. And that's how you sell yourself, not what you intend or aspire to do. And I think sometimes because we internalize a lot of, racist imagery and just trauma from our experiences as Black people, which I do empathize with, we undersell ourselves, or we say things that indicate immediately that there's deep insecurity there, and people will write you off. So, and you're already working with so many things, we're working with a lot against us. So you have to know how to sell yourself. You have to know how to walk in a room and cross-reference your resume and be able to be quick and on your feet about how you talk about who you are and what you want to do professionally. And then to further translate that, okay, when I'm in this environment, how am I going to express to these people what I told them I'm capable of doing? And if you don't, that's okay, because a lot of people in corporate America don't know.
They don't know.
So get information and advice from people who have done that and who are trying to navigate it. And if you don't know, research it, look it up. There's different ways you can work around not being sure of yourself. And it's okay to have those feelings, but you have to prove, what you said you're going to do. That's really, really important.
And I would say the money is always there.
Ooh.
Right? That as someone who teaches this, I have so many people that are afraid. I can't ask for that. It's too much. This is way more than what I made before. The money is always there. Do the research, find out what the median or the average salary is for the job that you're applying for, and that is what you ask for, that and then some, right? That is the main piece. Too many times we walk it, again, no one is doing you a favor, right? This is a job, you're doing a job for a compensation. You need to get compensated for what the role requires, not for what you made before, not for the title that you had before. I don't care if you worked part-time as an assistant. If they're hiring you to be a CEO, you need to get a CEO paycheck, right? So I think that is like my one main thing in that space, is that the money is there. And I think too many times as Black people, we're so nervous to ask for it. White people are not nervous to ask for it. So we need to ask for what we want and more. Not even what we want. Do the research, because a lot of times what we want is a lot more than so that.
Yeah, they always say proposition up so you can negotiate to at least the bare minimum of what you'll take. So
yeah. So we're going to wrap for time, because that's it. That's all the time we have. But but I would like to first say thank you to my wonderful panel of experts. And, you guys are amazing Black content creators, ideators. You guys are like my inspiration. And I just want to say thank you to the attendees. Thank you for coming to this town hall, and please be on the lookout for a survey, because we would love to know what you think. And that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Have a great night.
Take care.